Hello and welcome to episode 134 of DF Direct Weekly. I am John Linneman. Richard Ledbetter is out on recovery duty, I suppose. He's over at the med station, getting better. So, and from that laugh, you can tell I am joined still by Alex Battaglia over there.
Yeah, I either imagine him at like one of the Half-Life med stations going, or picking up some stim packs in Doom.
That's kind of what I was envisioning as well. Maybe the Riddick thing, though. I don't know, with the big needles.
The big needles in the neck.
That would be great. But of course, Alex, without Rich here by our side, we needed someone to come in and replace him. Even though he's irreplaceable, there's still we needed a special guest. And this week, we have quite a special guest. He is the director and publisher on C-Smash VRS, runs an excellent podcast called Directional, which I was on recently, and is just a genuinely enjoyable fellow to speak with. It's Jörg Tittel. Welcome.
Hello! God, my name sounds so German when you say it. It's because you live there. Yeah. Jörg Tittel, hello! Nice to meet you all. But yes, it's first of all, like, it's crazy how nerd empathy works. There's someone, recovering, and you just talk about health packs and video games. It's just
that's how it works.
And then just casually replace him with some random guy with a vaguely German-sounding name.
Some random German.
It's awful, you guys. Honestly, I'm sorry for Richard.
I think he's doing better at least right now.
Yeah, he's doing better now.
Okay, good.
But yes,
thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. We have some fun stuff to discuss today. We are going to talk some VR stuff later, but we're also going to go through the news segments as usual, and we have some of them to talk about. So let's get into it right now. All right, news topic 1. I feel weird doing this after, I haven't done this for a while because it's usually Rich. But
you're doing well, though.
But it's Spider-Man 2 is out right now. Sorry, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. We got to be correct on that, It's out, and I thought it would be interesting to discuss some thoughts on what you guys, what are your thoughts on what you've seen thus far, how the launch is looking, and just general feelings on it. Because we got our tech video out earlier this week, even though it was limited to, I guess, 20 minutes of new footage or so. It did make an appearance on the channel. We're going to have more Spider-Man content on the way. Oliver's got a comparison video in the works. And I got an interview with Mike from Insomniac, who is the tech director at their, at Insomniac in general. So that should be really interesting. Look for that when it comes up. But gentlemen, I assume neither of you have actually had a chance to play the game yet. Is that right?
No, I haven't. I've been wholly plugged into every screenshot and video you've been sending me, John, though. And I guess my first impressions are that I'm very happy that Insomniac took the time to make a kind of ray tracing only title, which has been pretty rare this generation. Usually a lot of these games have fallbacks for a performance mode. And in their case, given the fact that they achieved a ray tracing performance mode in every single game they've released so far this generation, them carrying it through to the final product in this one, and then getting rid of the non-ray tracing mode, because at that point in time it was kind of redundant, maybe other than like a slightly higher resolution in some areas and things like that. I'm very happy to see that, because it's kind of what we at the channel have always been really wanting for this generation of consoles, as well as just for the industry in general, to move away from classical techniques and move on to finally, 2018, Turing comes out, real-time ray tracing is here. We're finally at the point where games are shipping with ray tracing only. And that made me really happy to see, actually.
Yeah, and
I personally think they're too lazy to put in a turn ray tracing off button.
Well,
that's definitely it.
It's so important to me to turn that ray tracing off if I want to.
Don't speak sacrilege here. You're in the house of ray tracing.
There's a excuse me, Oliver. There's a TAA subreddit. There definitely has to be a ray tracing subreddit, right?
That must be.
Yeah, that's true.
I personally am very excited about the game, and I have massive superhero sort of burnout. I hate the stuff. I can't stand it anymore. But they're so creative, and Insomniac. I've been a fan of their games and their approach to everything since the very beginning. And ever since they sort of collaborated on, remember when Jack and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank were sharing the same engine? It all started from there, really, from me really, really falling in love with their work. And and also they've always made tech delightful. They've used it always in a delightful way. Their stuff never feels like a tech demo. The stuff always feels,
built
joyful
with purpose,
and super well crafted. I love their work. And also we shouldn't forget that there's a Hellboy game that came out this week as well.
Wait, what?
I know it's exactly. Yeah, see, you're all surprised, but it came out this week. I think today, which is kind of bad timing, I would say, for them. But
that is bad timing.
But I hear it's a great game. I just wanted to slip that in there.
Huh. That's a good slip in.
There was also a King Kong game out this week, which is perhaps less of a great game. We might have to look at that at some point.
We may actually have to, John.
I'm very excited. Can you turn ray tracing off on King Kong?
I don't think King Kong has ray tracing at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm afraid.
Oh my God, John, we should do a dual playthrough of me playing 2005 King Kong and you playing the new King Kong and comparing. That
would be interesting. Yeah. Beyond that, I think one of the things that Insomniac has really done well this generation is, and I still remain kind of baffled by how efficient they are, but this is like their fourth shipping PS. Wait, is it fourth? Yeah, this is their fourth shipping. Fourth. If you count Spider-Man Remastered, they've basically shipped
a PSVR game somewhere in there?
I don't think they've done. They have not done a PSVR 2 game, but they've shipped, multiple PS5 SKUs at this point. Obviously, Spider-Man Remastered and Miles Morales, and then there was Ratchet and Clank, and now there's this, and that's within 3 years. Well, obviously there would have been development time prior to the release, naturally, but I think that's a pretty impressive accomplishment, right, Alex? I mean, it's like, it also kind of, I think, shows the benefits of working with your own in-house technology. Right? They have a staff that's very intimately familiar with every aspect of the development pipeline for making these types of games.
Yeah, it does remind me. Actually, the output cycle does remind me a bit more of like a PS2 era kind of studio, where, if you read back in time and about any of the larger, semi-larger, even AA studios at the time, they had multiple projects working at the same time, and they actually released. It wasn't like a 5 to 6 year long project and one of them was canceled midway through or something like that, which is the typical thing nowadays. Or it comes out and it's a extraction shooter. So I'm really happy to see them. Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to brag, but I released 3 games this year.
Well, there you go.
Wait, really? 3 this year?
Yeah, The Last Worker in March.
That's true.
On every bloody system in the world, pretty much. Then in March as well, Skew on Playdate.
Oh, right. Skew.
Oh, Playdate. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, with a game with Frédéric Renal, with the creator of Alone in the Dark. We were I think we pretty much still are the only proper real-time 3D game on Playdate. And you should do a tech analysis of that one. The frame rates are butter smooth as well.
I need to figure out how to capture Playdate.
How do you even capture Playdate?
It must be possible.
Oh, and then C-Smash,
of course,
VRS on PlayStation VR 2. So even Insomniac hasn't made a PSVR 2 game. So.
Which is a shame because if you guys recall, Insomniac actually did dabble in the VR space early on, right? They made
they did.
Multiple, I think, games. There was that. Dang it! Sounds like
sort of island hopping thing with a robot kind of thing.
Yeah, there's that. There was the thing with Magic that has a name that reminds me of Forspoken, but it's not Forspoken. And Forspoken has forever ruined my vocabulary.
Yes, vocabulary. You can't even think of any whimsical fantasy games anymore.
So Insomniac did actually have they do have a track record of making VR games for the PC, no less. But I guess they've kind of jumped ship from that, and I can see why. They're obviously their output for normal console games is really, really impressive and kind of central.
Do you remember their first person shooter on PlayStation 1 that
Disruptor?
What was it called? Disruptor.
Yes.
Oh, that was so good.
Disruptor
I think John
is
even
actually
mentioned
great.
it in what video? Did you mention it in your Doom video in one of the clone section?
I've mentioned it at some point for sure, but it's genuinely a great shooter that they did back on PlayStation, and it's known for having a buttery smooth frame rate, which is unusual for that era, right? So it's an impressive game. They did that before Spyro. I don't think it was a huge success, but it's a cool game, and it even has FMV cutscenes. Which, where's the FMV in Spider-Man 2? Like, come on.
Did they actually use any to hide anything in the game? Because I can't even recall if the first game has FMVs. I don't think so.
From playing through the game, I'm pretty sure every single scene in Spider-Man 2 is real time. So that they don't do transitional stuff. And that actually brings me to another kind of point is like, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Alex, is the loading stuff, right? Like they're obviously, so there was bits of the fast travel video going around, and conceptually it's nothing new. People were actually highlighting a Driver's San Francisco, I think it was, which was a really cool game. The Crew also does this feature, and that's Reflections. I don't know if they're actually related, but either way, we've seen this sort of zooming in and out of the map before, and I actually thought it was interesting because, and it was the same with Ratchet's Portals, where you saw stuff like Titanfall 2 do similar things. We've seen stuff on PlayStation 2 use the same approach, but I think there's more to this to explain why it's this sort of thing can scale conceptually. So it doesn't take away from what they're doing in Spider-Man 2 so much as just highlight some of the differences there in terms of how much data is being moved around, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we don't have like internal metrics or anything like that. We don't know unless Mike handed them off to us secretly under the table when you interviewed him. But like the basic concept is that obviously you've seen quick transitions in games before in the past. John's talked about a number of them on the channel before. It's a big PS2 thing. Titanfall 2, you can do it in levels. There's an area in Dishonored 2 where it does it at the exact same time. You can switch between two worlds. And the basic concept in those games, usually, because they were targeting previous generation consoles primarily, is that you would have to have whatever you're going to be displaying soon enough. Nearly all of it already has to be in system memory. And on a console like the PlayStation 5, there's a limited amount of system memory. So you either spend all your resources making what you're seeing looks really great in front of you, using the memory for that, or you would have to split up that memory and hold two scenes in the same time. The entire purpose of having a fast storage solution like the SSD and the custom I/O stuff in the PlayStation 5 is to make it so that you can keep a higher level of fidelity everywhere in the world and do somewhat quick transitions to them. Obviously, they're not the same level of instantaneous as hitting like the button in Titanfall 2 to change a thing, but the whole point is that you can get there quickly and have high levels of fidelity, which is something that people on the internet tend to miss out on. I think it's the fidelity. That's the difference.
Exactly. And, like you mentioned, Titanfall 2 is a case where I would imagine they sort of keep those two scenes resonant in memory as you're going through, right? So you're basically simultaneously juggling those two scenes. So they're able to instantly switch because of how they purpose built it that way. And it works super well. It's actually, I would say, I wonder if the old, there's some games that would allow you to swap between old and new graphics, like the Halo Anniversary titles.
They do that.
It's actually kind of a similar concept to that in a way, where you're keeping such and such data in memory so you can quickly bounce back and forth without any issues. And they actually do there'll be more in the interview, but they actually do a little bit of this obviously in Spider-Man with like animations. Like you was mentioning how the animation data for the game is gigantic this time around. There's so much animation data. Keeping all that in memory is difficult. But because the player can do any number of these actions at any time, they kind of need to be ready for it. So they keep like sort of like a decimated version or like a reduced memory footprint version of every single possible animation, like ready in memory at any point. And then basically if you hit into it, it can quickly fetch the rest of that data. So it's never in a place where it'll stall completely, Right. So there's a lot of clever memory management stuff going on as well to kind of keep all this stuff fluid. And
another example too is you did show off in your video that there was portals in the game. You can see the other world on the other edge of those portals. Presuming they're not just like a cube map or something like that, those things that you can see always in a game have to be in memory too. Exactly. So like in that aspect is another aspect where they're doing something like the Titanfall 2 thing, but it's just like a portal to another area that you can.
Yeah, I'd assume like while that scene begins, the stuff loads up in the background, and then by the time you actually hit the portal, it's already like ready to go, and then you just launch right into it. So cool stuff. But yeah, I'll be interested to see more on it. We'll have more comparisons coming up from Oliver, like I said, kind of showing how it compares the different modes. Let's actually take some questions here from the patrons on Spider-Man 2. I keep saying just Spider-Man 2, and so do they, but it's Marvel Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man.
I wonder if they get in trouble internally at the studio if they leave out the Marvels part, Marvel apostrophe S. Let's just pretend it's here in the question. So this one comes from Ishrek Subhan, who says, "Hey John, with Insomniac's impressive implementation of ray tracing features in Spider-Man 2, do you think this bodes well for the longevity of the PlayStation 5 and pushes back any calls for an enhanced or quote-unquote pro console refresh in the future?"
Well, he didn't say Marvel's Spider-Man 2, so he might be talking about a different game.
He's talking about that.
The Activision one.
Activision. Yeah, I was about to say.
I think, well, I don't think the Activision one has ray tracing though, so maybe it's just a typo.
I worked on that one.
Wait.
I was a Treyarch at the time.
Hold on. So I got to pivot here for a second. You worked on that Spider-Man 2.
Well, I did a bit of translation help on that.
Oh,
one,
okay.
Because I was working on the utterly garbage Minority Report game.
The Xbox one, GameCube one.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
I remember that Minority Report.
Yeah.
Everybody runs.
Everybody did.
Everybody ran
From the game.
Yes, they sure did.
Anyway, sorry to distract from the question.
That is an interesting factoid. All right, Alex, what do you think about this actually?
I think, well, so if you are an enthusiast who is very interested in getting the best you can out of a console, and you liked things like PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, then actually you can actually see in Spider-Man already where, I mean, when Oliver puts out his video detailing the differences between the performance mode and the visual quality mode at 30 FPS, you will see differences between them, both in resolution and other settings. And if you could imagine if a PS5 Pro were not CPU limited, it would actually be a great way to push, for example, with double the GPU power, a quality mode up to roughly 60 FPS. And so, or depending upon, we don't know a whole lot about the PS5 Pro yet, but if it does actually do anything different and it's not just straight RDNA 3, then they do something like, I don't know, have machine learning upscaling,
right.
or if they have ray traversal unit, or anything that is just not straight RDNA, let's be honest with you, like then they could maybe push that ray tracing in new directions with we already know internally that the engine supports ray trace ambient occlusion, and it supports ray trace shadows. If you think about it, in this, even actually, first of all, really funny thing is that if you look at Spider-Man, the first game and the second game actually have ray trace shadows in them. Did you notice them? Well, maybe you didn't, because they have them in the reflections. That's how you do visibility and reflections usually, is you actually cast a shadow ray. So they can just port that over to the main world rendering, which they've already done for the PC versions of these games, and like Ratchet and Clank. You can already see areas where they could push those visuals further in a way that is, it would benefit the graphical presentation.
Right.
I don't know about a 60 FPS or not, because we don't know anything about the CPU of the PS5 Pro
right.
yet. But I think if you're someone who's really interested in the idea of a pro console, I can look at Spider-Man 2 and already see areas where it could be improved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned the shadows, because that was also a feature of the interior rendering, which those are ray traced interiors, right? And to get those shadows being perfect like that, they are ray traced. They're not using shadow maps there. So that is potential for a future thing. But actually, I want to mention that Insomniac's kind of like among the best in terms of using RT on console thus far. Their solution is performant and it looks good. But I do think we're already seeing sort of the limits of these machines pushed a little bit with some of these early Unreal Engine 5 games. And this could change, because UE4 was also not very performant initially last gen either, right? But like Tom, for instance, is looking at Lords of the Fallen. And it drops on Series S to like, what, 324p. It's like 576 by 324, which is like sub PlayStation 2 resolutions now.
Yeah, and also like the PS5 and Xbox Series X also dropped to sub 720p.
Sub 720p. And
that's 60 FPS mode though.
In the 60 FPS mode. So like we're already seeing like to get there with this new engine and this new technology, major sacrifices are being made to image quality. Like we're back down to levels that I'm honestly surprised to see again. And the reconstruction technologies like FSR2, for instance, they're not really capable of handling such a low pixel count, I would say. So as a result, I do think, and I didn't think this a year or two ago, but I'm starting to believe that, you know, a pro console would be potentially useful. Just based on what we're seeing right now with the UE5 stuff and low resolutions in plenty of other games lately. I just think Insomniac, they make very specific choices for their game that allows for a very clean image and smooth performance while still featuring ray tracing. But like you said, Alex, with a pro console, maybe they could push that. Maybe they have a quality mode that's 60 FPS and then like a performance mode that goes for 120 or something. Like if the CPU were up to the task, mind you. But
And yet the sales of the Switch are going up in Japan this year. And that thing hasn't been updated for a while. So
yeah,
there's a giant split in the market. Yeah.
But I think people are waiting for the new Switch, and based on the rumors, it could actually be rather potent as well. And I'm actually curious to see if they can hit the ground running with that and continue to leverage the success of the original Switch into a new model. Because, you know, Nintendo has traditionally struggled with these generational leaps, right? It doesn't always hit for them. So we'll find out.
Well, they're taking their time this time, I think, compared to other periods.
I kind of don't blame them, given their success, right? And they've had a lot of change in leadership during this period as well, so... but anyway, another question here from Zephyr. He says, "Hi, DF team. I was really surprised when I learned that Spider-Man 2 requires that ray tracing is enabled. As far as I know, this is the first AAA game to do so. When this game inevitably gets ported to the PC, do you think they'll keep this requirement? Is this a signal that ray traced only will soon become the norm?" Alex?
Not the first AAA game to do it.
That's right.
You've got
Metro.
Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition is the first. In fact, I'm pretty sure I start the video with those exact same words. I did on it.
Is there another one? I mean, technically the UE5 stuff could be considered.
A lot of the UE5 stuff is, even though it'll drop back to software mode, but the requirements for the GPU are still so high that it's almost like we're doing it. And also you've got, I guess, technically Portal RTX Remastered and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's all ray tracing only. But I would imagine, the PC version would probably be ray tracing only. It'd be pretty weird at that. It's going to probably come out in 2 years from now, based on the current cadence. That would be 2025. That would be 7 years after the launch of real-time ray tracing. Dude, if you don't have a GPU that can do it by then, that means you bought your GPU either in 2019 with AMD or like 2016 with NVIDIA. Like, I don't know. Like, every 6 years you should probably get a new GPU. Like,
well, speaking of that, Dark Rod 99, which is a great name, by the way, also says, "This question is more for Alex, but given how well Spider-Man 2 scales in all modes with RT enabled, does this bring excitement for the PC port coming? And what type of improvements do you expect to see on PC?"
Wow. It scales a lot like the first game did. So I imagine what they'll do, like in Spider-Man, the first game, which they didn't do for Ratchet and Clank, which always disappointed me, is that they'll make the ray tracing quality higher, like a way they make it cheaper for consoles because there's like a limited ray budget and how many different triangles it can touch. They like reduce the quality of the world and the reflections. So like that would be something they already enhanced for the first game. They should probably do it for the second game. Among other things I could see them doing, they'll probably have ray trace shadows and ray trace ambient occlusion, and who knows what else they'll put in. It's Nixies. They're a very high quality team if they give enough time to work on the games, hopefully. So I expect great things.
Cool. And that's kind of the tagline for the whole series is like be greater or whatever. So Hopefully they will be greater with that port to the PC when it eventually arrives. But I think that's going to wrap it up for Spider-Man 2 chat. Sorry, Marvel Spider-Man 2 chat. So let's move on to the next story. All right, so next up on this topic, Richard has included this, and it's an interesting thought experiment. It's basically The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. Is it really needed? What about the rumored remake of Horizon Zero Dawn? My answer is, frankly, no. It's not really needed. I don't know what you guys think, though.
It's a big no for me, but the only reason why I think they would do it, as in The Last of Us 2, is because they would re-release it with a PC port. That's what they would do, is what I would imagine. Because they have to do, they ported part 1. I'm presuming they're going to port part 2 at some point in time, and I would imagine they would double whammy it and release it on PlayStation 5 at the same time. Rather unnecessarily, but
okay,
that's what they would do.
That's not actually a bad point. That I could see the business case for that, but still,
the business case is there. But the creative case that I find so strange about it is that again, the more realistic the games get, the more quickly they age, and that's becoming a problem from a production point of view and from a budgeting point of view for these companies, and also from a moral point of view as far as their staff members are concerned. As we know, Naughty Dog just laid off a bunch of people,
right?
Because they're very poor and they've never sold any copies of
any of their games.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Struggling startup they
Indie
are, and
studio.
And so they're, I'm sorry, but there's something really quite cynical about doing these HD remakes all the time, but at the same time also shows a sort of lack of imagination that is both happening on the AAA side, but also on the consumer side gradually, as they're getting used to games getting more and more generic and mimicking quote unquote realism more and more. And then you have games like Inside, for instance, which, many years after their release are still looking exactly as great as they did on day one, because they actually had style.
Yeah.
I would say to that point, though, not only beyond that, it also kind of highlights just the difficulty of producing games at this scale, right? They've set the bar so high in just terms of the fidelity that they need to hit in their games, that it takes so much time, money, and manpower to make one of these things, so much so that I can see why someone would say we should probably try to release something in the interim to sort of bring in more money, because even though you joke about the sales and everything, but with a studio of that size, with that many staff members, especially based where they are out in California, that's got to be insanely expensive to operate year after year.
It's expensive. Yeah, right. But then you have, in the film industry, thankfully, there are things coming out now that get away from the sort of realism that a lot of even silly, people in superhero movies were going for. So I mean, with Barbie, for instance, they're actually going for style and for the completely sort of outrageous colors and stuff like that. And hopefully we'll be seeing some of that in AAA games as well, where some studios will actually dare to get away from realism and go oh, come on, this is silly. This sort of not just feature but budget creep that we've been doing from one generation to another. Is that really necessary? Can we make something that looks so fresh that it will always look fresh? And that takes some courage, but it also takes some vision, and that will then sort of. But then it would prevent big companies from making additional revenue every 2 years with an HD remake. So I guess we could balance that one.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would almost wish, instead of re-releasing an HD version of the game or going for a Horizon Zero Dawn remake, which is so redundant, my gosh, would be to do what, oh my gosh, the guys who made Evil Within. What's the name of the studio?
Oh, Tango Gameworks.
Tango Gameworks, where they put out 2 different games of a smaller budget, one highly stylized, one semi-stylized, in a short time span. One was shadow dropped, of course, too. That is, I'm forgetting the name, of course. I'm forgetting everything this morning.
Hi-Fi Rush.
Hi-Fi Rush, very stylized game. It allowed, I think the style in that game is really high.
Absolutely.
And it's gorgeous and it runs well. And it's also a fresh, interesting idea, while they also had another studio going around, another part of the studio working on Ghostwire Tokyo,
Yep.
which is a completely different game type. And I would love to see that, actually. John and I talk about it like all the time. We love AA kind of games. And I think that is a much more interesting usage of time rather than re-releasing, old games with a lick of paint.
It's almost like a TikTok scenario, as we say when discussing like CPU architecture, right? Where it'd be nice to have these studios. You have your large AAA team, and then you have like a smaller team that's allowed to do these more experimental games, sort of like in between the big ones, right? So to keep that going and build the studio in a way where that team can have their own autonomy, and it's not like they're just like feeding into the cycle of the big AAA stuff. But obviously,
but also, I agree. But also, I think that HD remakes will soon be probably starting with the next generation will be made entirely by AI tools.
Oh God! That's terrifying.
Of course, like if you're going for realism, it's the easiest thing to mimic now. I mean, today, like for instance, it's a big scandal in France. The French news has been sharing sort of AI news photos and putting it on the news, and people are just going, it's becoming so real and so quick to turn this stuff around that, and this will be a really great way for big companies to just lay off their staff. Sure, we don't. So that's coming.
That is a legit concern indeed. I'm not too fond of that where we're going there. We're starting to see that stuff creep into everything. Even like Google image search is being contaminated with like nonstop AI images, and they've introduced that new feature that generates it based on your search on the fly. It's getting to, this is not good. This is not good at all. And I definitely don't like this idea of AI generated remasters. Obviously, there'll still be a human component, but just relying entirely. Not that we haven't seen that already, like games with pre-rendered backgrounds, for instance. AI has been leveraged in the past to enhance those, and I can kind of get that to a degree, given that those original source assets wouldn't exist anymore, and that is a significant cost saver. But
of course, but now you feed all your texture maps, through the thing, and it'll just up-res everything, upscale everything, render everything a bit more realistic. I mean, it's coming.
Yeah, I know.
It's probably
ready to go. I mean, with RTX Remix, technically, they have the ability to feed textures into it and give you AI upsampled versions of them.
We're definitely heading in that direction. I do want to comment though on the state of realistic graphics and how I do still think it's possible to achieve sort of realism, but in a way that's stylized enough where it holds up. I mean, obviously the go-to remains Crysis. Sure. Crysis 1 went for realism. I still think it's beautiful. The art direction was sublime. But one of the developers...
it's about art direction, right?
One of the developers I think that continues to excel in this area above many others is Remedy. Like, you look at what Control was doing, right? There's a lot of realistic rendering features in there, really high-end ray tracing features, but it's so beautifully stylized with a brutalist architecture and just like strong like lighting choices, and it's amazing. And I think what we've seen of Alan Wake 2, which is coming out very soon, it's the same story, right? Where there's realistic elements for sure, but they've built the visuals in a way to be highly stylized, and I really love that sort of approach.
And Housemarque, of course, also did a beautiful job with their game.
God.
And then
Returnal.
They could blend realism and style. Maybe it's a Scandinavian thing. Who knows?
I think it's also a little bit of a budget thing because, like, obviously, this is not to be mean or anything like that, but if you want to take your budget further, using stylization and color filtering, and also just going for bold things, like a lot of Control is like just really bold, like stark, bleak architecture that lacks a lot of like forward-facing detail.
Yep.
And it's like about colors. It's more about scene arrangement at that point in time. So you're not spending time making thousands of different assets for each scene, right? That have to all be unique and different, right? It's more about using lights to change the assets in a different scene to give it a different feel. And they do that all over the game in Control. If you've seen anything for Alan Wake 2 in the preview material, they're using a lot of the same scenes over and over again with like different twists on them. It's a very good way to control the budget. And I just read online right now, Control was made with a quote unquote modest budget of $30 million, which, given the visuals in that game, I think that's kind of impressive.
That's a pretty good budget target, I'd say, for a game like that.
like AA. Yeah,
compared
smaller.
to some of the budget numbers we've seen and heard for the really big AAA stuff. It's just staggering, frightening, starting to knock on the door of billions. Not actually there yet, but you know, it's pretty high. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you know, it's an interesting topic. I can kind of see Alex, you mentioning the PC version, that does kind of connect for Last of Us 2, I suppose. But remaking Horizon Zero Dawn, like, that just sounds completely unappealing, and I don't.
It sounds so bad.
I don't get why. I mean, I'm sure they've run the numbers, but good Lord. But, you know, gentlemen, there is another news topic to discuss here, and I think this one's kind of funny because, well, let's get to it. So yes, on this next topic, basically, we were just talking Remedy, we were talking Alan Wake. Well, there does seem to have been an Alan Wake recap created within Fortnite. So, key locations and sequences from Alan Wake seem to have been sort of made to run within Fortnite. Is this using the creative mode, whatever it's called? I'm not sure actually.
Yeah, it's like a separate area you have to load up. It's like a separate island you load up.
But it is kind of like, hey, here's like a bit of Alan Wake with Lumen and Nanite stuff enabled. Although, you know, whether, yeah. You've seen the video.
Yeah, based on what I've seen, some of it does look like model imports from the original game.
Yeah.
And it's all using like the latest Unreal Engine 5 rendering stuff otherwise, though. So it is lit at least pretty well and stuff like that. But I like the idea of this because the original Alan Wake is so long ago.
Yeah.
They did release a remaster recently, which has kind of like... Which is like I'm split on. I like the idea of what they tried to do there because it was released at a time when there was like a little bit of weirdness with the Xbox 360 version of the game, but it kind of came out in a level of polish that I wasn't too happy with. I don't know if you've ever played it, especially the console version of it. Still has like really weird frame drops for a game that's so old. But this is a good way. Because Alan Wake 2 is an extreme departure in terms of narrative, I would say, from the first game. And so this, if you want to figure, and gameplay wise too. So like if you don't know anything about Alan Wake and want to play Alan Wake 2, and I'm going to recommend wanting to play it because I think it looks awesome. This is probably a good way to actually figure it out. And just goes back into the whole idea that Fortnite is the only real attempt at a quote unquote metaverse.
I was going to say
Facebook's doing.
Fortnite has basically become its own like living advertisement program where it's just like everybody wants to throw their IP into Fortnite and you just see these weird mashups, and it is transforming into a metaverse. It's not the only one though. I would argue Roblox is actually comparable in many ways.
That's a good point.
It's as popular, probably more popular still, and it has the same sort of like community coming together to make weird things together. But both of these definitely do it better than what Meta has attempted, I suppose, so far.
I played a Sonic game inside Dreams on PlayStation, which I really enjoyed.
Dreams is another thing that's basically like this, I suppose. And I think Dreams would have found a lot more success. Not that it didn't find some success, but if there had been a proper PC client, that's what's missing.
I agree. It's sad. I prefer Dreams and the whole philosophy, the community, the positivity behind it, because it's not all revolving around a shooty game in which you dance after you've killed everyone. So I think to me that was a far more positive idea of a metaverse in that sense, or of a creative community. It saddens me that Fortnite has to be the one actually, and especially also now in light of Epic's interesting moves in the last couple of weeks.
Indeed.
Where Sweeney suddenly sort of puts building the metaverse ahead of the well-being of 900 people and their families, which is probably now 5,000 lives or more lives probably affected by this bullshit. So whatever, Fortnite. I mean, the thing that really annoyed the hell out of me is when I saw RoboCop inside Fortnite. That's when I realized what an absolute nonsense this whole metaverse concept is. This is like, this is the ultimate sort of anti-capitalist sort of symbol.
I think it's very typical, though, of what large, kind of self-consuming systems do. They'll definitely, how do we call that? Like, subvert the original intention of something
completely,
and then make it its own. Mm-hmm.
It just surprises me that people doing the license deals don't go like, hang on a second. I mean,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's amazing.
No. Can't wait for Starship Troopers to show up in here. Completely missed the message.
Oh, it's probably already in there, John.
Is it? It might
Let's
be.
be honest with you. It's probably already in there.
Well, we're living in it now, so.
Don't remind me. I do want to say, though, despite the Roblox Corporation making some strange decisions and some things I don't necessarily agree with, I do actually see the power of that platform as well, because my son does use that, and it has taught him many valuable skills about just how does a game work, right? The Roblox Studio editor is it's a surprisingly powerful sort of like set of tools reminiscent of something like Unreal Engine or Unity, somewhat simplified, but it has its own like scripting language in there as well. And I found that he's just naturally continued to play with these tools while connecting with his friends in Roblox. They're working on things together in real time and like collaborating to build stuff. And they're doing things that, a game engine tool would be designed for. And they don't even realize necessarily that they're learning these concepts, right? It's more just like, oh man, what if we could do this cool thing? And then they go figure it out, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't all revolve around this third person kill each other.
It does not.
Mechanic, which is what this Fortnite metaverse thing is.
Exactly. And, Roblox and Dreams are both these kind of open canvas kind of games, where it's like you just go make stuff and you find things to do, and that's what you do. Fortnite, the thing I will say about Fortnite is that it does serve as a vehicle for testing Unreal Engine. And I think Fortnite is exactly the thing that Unity has always lacked. And one of the reasons why I think they've struggled is that as Epic introduces new features in Unreal Engine, they're able to actually roll them out into a production game and put them in a real world test with a huge user base, no less. And I think that's actually very important for engine development in terms of determining what.
And this is also how you get to lay off hundreds of QA people.
Oh yeah,
because you could just use customers to do the work for you.
Let's hope they don't do that, but they kind of did though. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Unity though, obviously.
Oh gosh, Unity's
they have their own set of problems, I think, and Epic kind of came in with its own layoffs at a weird time when it's like all the news was doom and gloom, and then
that's something we never actually ended up talking about because sometimes we got a lot of questions actually underneath the video when a lot of the Unity stuff was going on, like why haven't we talked about it? Sometimes just as a note to people in the audience, sometimes bad news usually comes out on Fridays, like in the middle of the afternoon, and we record before then, just so everyone knows. So if we don't talk about something that came out around the weekend in one of our DF Direct videos, it's probably because we just didn't actually catch it for the recording.
Yeah. Also, Bobby Kotick tends to behave right until sort of Friday evening.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's that. Oh, sorry. I was about to make a bad joke. Never mind.
All right. That's enough. Enough of that. Let's get back to a different topic. All right. So the next topic though is something a little different, and this actually relates to AMD. How about that? It's specifically AntiLag Plus. There was an interesting situation here, I think, with Counter-Strike 2, where users enabling AntiLag Plus at the driver level, it was actually like injecting itself into some DLLs, I believe, and causing the anti-cheat stuff to trigger in the game, which was resulting in people, I guess, getting banned, causing problems. So it was recommended that this not be used. And I suspect this was sort of the catalyst for AMD disabling it entirely. So first, Alex, I guess just remind people what AntiLag Plus is about, and then let's talk about like what's going on here.
AntiLag Plus is AMD's somewhat of a response to Reflex, which is an NVIDIA-based thing that works on like any GPU, pre-RTX, whatever, where it is trying to reduce the amount of input latency in the game. And the way they do it is partially, I think it's actually different across the way Reflex and AntiLag Plus do it. We haven't actually had the time to do a full investigation of AntiLag Plus because, well, things like this have happened. The basic premise of why this happened at all is because, like a lot of, for example, like reshade or even a lot of hacks that are being done by users in the past historically have tried to detour DLL calls, and that's how you get like things like RTSS in games and stuff like that too. And a lot of cheat software looks to try and prevent these things. They don't always outright ban you, is another thing. Sometimes they let the cheats or things go on in the background that they know are either innocuous, or they want to get like a vector in on it first before they start banning people. But for here, they actually kind of just like started immediately banning people from Counter-Strike 2. In other games, there were also issues. I read online like that in Apex, there was also banning occurring, but it wasn't explicit. It wasn't like, unlike the reason why it came out in such a big thing is because there was a literal tweet from the CS2 main account on Twitter that called out AMD. And usually that's pretty weird to see.
That's like, pretty bad. Yeah.
So the thing for me is that, they've now the most recent driver that, launched, they've retracted actually AntiLag Plus isn't functioning. It doesn't even work for the single player games anymore. And I think, and there's also right now currently, Valve is working with AMD to reverse all the bans that occurred.
That's good.
Which is good. I don't know about any other games though, so I can't comment on that. But the thing is, it actually brings up a question of like philosophy of how you implement this kind of thing. Like AntiLag Plus was a driver feature in this case, and the way it was working with a game like CS2 or Apex Legends. And the way it would realistically do it, the way they decided to do it, was through a DLL detouring. And that's probably not a good idea. And it's a little surprising that they came out with it without contacting Valve or letting know, like, or just even doing it this way in the first place. Probably a great idea. So either right now what they're going to do is they're going to rethink how AntiLag Plus works completely, and maybe make it more like NVIDIA's Reflex, where you get like an SDK that ships with the game, and then users have an option in the menu to select, kind of like it is with Reflex right now. Or maybe they're just going to shelve it. We're going to have to figure this out in time. I imagine they're going to have to come up with a solution, because the current way they shipped it obviously is not working with what developers want. Even though it looked like it had promising results. Rich did a little bit of testing on it, and it looked like it was going to do something really good.
That's the thing, right?
Bit of shame.
It was a promising feature, and I'm a little bit confused as to how this kind of slipped through. You know, it does. I don't get it. I'm actually not sure what happened there, but hopefully they can basically take the work they've done on it already, and like you say, create some sort of SDK for the developers to use, where it can be freely included with the games, and you can enable it that way. I think that would be the best way to do it. Although maybe having a driver level option with like a big red caution flag, having a flag at the driver level where it's like, if it detects, say, game X starting, disable it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was already title specific, so you would have thought they would have thought that
point.
through.
That's a good point.
But so I guess, I don't know. And but the thing is, I think if they do bring it back, they're going to want to also, like with Reflex, enable it for things that aren't just Radeon RX 7000 series, because, you know, Reflex works with like almost 10-year-old GPUs at this point in time. So like, it would be nice to see if AMD brought it back, and also with more support for other GPUs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so that's enough on the AMD and AntiLag Plus. Hopefully there's not too much of a lag between when that feature returns. But for now, let's move on to the next topic. All right, it's time to clear the air and get to a topic that's a little bit more positive and happy, I suppose. Well, to some degree. There is a dark side to it as well, but it's virtual reality. I still love virtual reality, and I still believe in it. And there's a lot of great stuff that's still happening in that space, but it is in a slightly precarious situation, I suppose, in terms of how certain pieces of hardware are being supported, even though there is still good software happening there. But I wanted to start just by saying that one of my favorite experiences this year actually comes from Jörg himself and his team, and it's C-Smash VRS. I talked about this before, and man, C-Smash, that's how you first reached out to me about that, after I talked about it on here as well. So it is it's Cosmic Smash, but like in VR, obviously. But it's a beautiful aesthetic. And I'm curious to know a little bit more, like, how did you even get this off the ground? Like, how did you approach like going into Sega and being like, yeah, we want to bring back this somewhat obscure arcade and Dreamcast game and do it in VR? And how receptive were they to this?
I mean, it's like, first of all, like, this game is a collaboration with with amazing people, with Corey Schmitz and an archetype and an art director Rob Davis on my end, and Kenny Shi, who did the music for Rez, and for instance, or some of the music for Rez, and Danilog from The Comet Is Coming, an incredible musician who was a headliner at Glastonbury Festival this year. And the dev team on this is Wolf and Wood, and this is my second collaboration with them. We also made The Last Worker together earlier, which came out earlier this year. An incredible team, VR pioneers here in the UK, who did A Chair in the Room, they did the Exorcist game, they did a bunch of really, really cool things in VR over the years. And but yeah, getting it off the ground was a weird one. I first in a random meeting met someone from Sega in 2019. And mentioned my wish to do that to him. It just sort of came to me in the meeting, because it has been a dream to do a VR Cosmic Smash since, like, I played it in 2001, and he just looked at me and he had no idea what I was talking about, because I mean it is, you know, a very obscure title.
Kind of obscure, yeah.
So a $67 billion purchase of my company based on that IP is probably not going to happen tomorrow. But yeah, it's and then it took me a couple of years. Like, the pandemic happened, and I was, you know, we were all surrounded by this dystopian reality that we all, you know, was forcing us inside. And I was dreaming of something positive. I was dreaming of traveling into space. I was and just hitting a ball around and being fit and spending time with other people and being physical. And so I really made it my mission to get the rights, and it took going through basically every single level at Sega to finally bang every door down until they finally relented. But and they probably thought, and they probably still think to this day, that I'm insane, because I mean, it's freaking Cosmic Smash, but it's doing beautifully, and it's but it's been an interesting one, because you were talking about, you know, the hardware, and we're only out on PSVR 2 at the moment. Wink, wink. and it's a headset that is stunning. It's, I mean, in terms of, as far as gaming headsets are concerned, VR headsets are concerned, it's definitely the best, but it's very expensive, and so the take up on that has been pretty slow, especially in this economy, etc. It needs to be hooked into the PlayStation 5 via cable, which some people thought, oh, cable, but you know, once it's on your head, you don't think about the cable one ever. But yeah, so in terms of that is a hard one, because we're only on that system. But we thought, you know what, I'm going to use this year to go from one show to another. Bit Summit, for instance, in Kyoto, and IGN Plus was WASD in London, now in EGX last week, which was insane. There was like, I don't know how many people flocked into EGX. It was like 90,000 or something. And we were there for 4 days, and we regularly had queues of 50 people lining up to play our game. And now we're nominated for a Golden Joystick Award for Best VR Game. Actually, today is actually the last day to vote for it, I think. So by the time people listen to this, it will be too late.
Oh no!
But I'm chuffed. It's this crazy idea is turned into something really, really fun. It's a really fun game. You're playing squash and breakout in space, either alone or co-op or versus, with a huge, vast amount of different modes. There's a sort of epic single player mode which takes you to the edge of space and time. There's boss battles in it. It's insane. It's the best music ever in a game. I really adore it, and it makes me smile, and others too, I hope, always.
Yeah, because I mean, fundamentally, that's the thing with a game like this, is that it translates a simple hand motion to a game in a way that actually reflects your motions are reflected in game, kind of like Wii Tennis did back in the day, but with much more accuracy now because of the way the hand controllers work on VR. It just feels satisfying, especially with the haptics. Every time you hit the ball, it just feels just right. And, you know, with the more complex VR games, which I love as well, it can feel, you can still feel like you're kind of manipulating this thing in a space, but not really manipulating an object. But with a game like this, especially with this aesthetic, it does actually feel suitably like tangible in a way that I find really engaging. And that just rules, for sure. But yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's because I think reality, the real world is so distressing right now that but I also don't want to escape from it. I don't want to sort of escape from my responsibilities, but I want to travel places. And so we wanted to make a game that makes you travel into space and feel good, with others or alone. So that also means that we're not sort of doing some sort of slavish sort of simulation, but also we make you feel more powerful than you are in real life. Well, but we've also had pro tennis and squash players play it, and they pointed out how accurate it is, and they instantly were moving in that like crazy. So that's also fun to know. It's like if you are a pro, you can play it. But then I've also had people in wheelchairs play it against fully jumping about the room people online, and with no advantage to either, because we're adjusting the height levels of players to be equal.
Right.
And so there's all these accessibility things that we've built in are completely invisible, and we've not been bragging about them or anything. Maybe we should. But it feels good to actually make a sports game, and a competitive physical sports game, that people of all abilities can play on the same level with each other. It's an absolute joy. It feels so delightful and positive, and that's and there's just a few games out there that do that right now.
Yeah, and so, man, you kind of hinted at other platforms as well, and I hope that is the case. We are in this weird spot where, like, I feel like with the way the PSVR sales have been going, it would be tough at this point to greenlight another big project that just exclusively targets that. So it kind of feels like we're in a state where you kind of have to make your game target all available VR platforms, or at least all the major ones. I mean, obviously there's the meta stuff with the Quest, and the Quest 3 just came out, and that's pretty darn impressive. There's there's kind of a split, I guess, between wired and wireless VR. And I feel like wireless VR is finally really starting to, it's jumping up in terms of quality enough at this point. You know what I mean? Where it feels more viable than it used to, perhaps. Like the hardware's powerful enough.
With C-Smash, C-Smash especially, I mean, it's like, it has, it doesn't go for realism at all. It's super stylized, especially graphic design made physical, which, and that's not to say that we don't have some super crazy cool shaders in the game, which, for instance, your body, the way it's rendered and fully arcade in it's stunning. It looks unlike anything else out there. And the whole world is actually alive. So all the tiles, when you hit them with the balls, start to create these dot ripples that are sort of embedded in each sort of surface in the game. There's such cool stuff happening in the game, but the frame rate is crazy high, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
As you personally pointed out, I think it might be the highest frame rate on PSVR 2 of any game.
Yeah, are you native 120 now, or native 90?
What 90 for sure everywhere, but sometimes we creep up into the highest echelons. But it's like but there are moments when you're playing online with others, etc. And there's so much data that we're sending across.
Oh, right, that can interfere.
Yeah, but it's buttery smooth.
Yeah, I actually remember the demo had some technical hiccups, and you guys actually did fix them, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, within like days.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
That made a big difference. But
yeah, it did. Yeah, so so that game will translate. We haven't announced anything or whatever, but it would of course translate very beautifully to all the other headsets. I mean, the Pico 4, for instance, is a gorgeous headset. For people that are looking for sort of Quest 2 generation headset. It is super comfortable. I love it.
I have one right here actually. That's one I'm going to test here. I want to do a write up soon on some different headsets, because I've been really interested in how they all compare. I've tested this. I've tested a Quest 2, Quest 3 now, and then I've tested high end PC stuff like the Pimax Crystal, which
it looks cool.
Which is a totally different type of thing, but that thing is that is really focused on like ultra hardcore PC gaming pretty much exclusively, because you're driving like ultra high res screens in there. It's a heavy, big headset, but like, man, the quality of that experience is like, it's almost like a window into the type of VR. It would be cool to see this like standalone, but I feel like it's going to be a while before we can get to the point where,
But then there's the Apple Vision Pro, of course, coming next year.
But that's not even really gaming specific, right?
No,
like,
it's not. But as we know with them, if they have a Pro, then they'll do a non-Pro, whatever they're going to call it, probably the following year or whatever. Unless it's a complete disaster and a flop, who knows? But you know, and I know we were, you know, talking about the challenges at Unity, but it's interesting that they've had such a really close collaboration, because Unity actually is, you know, as far as VR
they're strong there.
Development is concerned, they're much stronger than Unreal. Yeah. So it is. I'm excited about that fact, that a lot of the R&D that will have crept in from their, you know, very lucrative collaboration with Apple would then also trickle down, or at least sideways to all the other headsets. So I think Apple entering that space actually bodes very, very well. And Meta is doing extremely well with the Quest 3 now. You know, it's selling out in a lot of markets. You know, they don't have any sort of titles that I can think of which are sort of like system sellers, but in a way they don't need to yet.
The Quest 3 is an interesting device, because so having used that, I feel like the Pico 4 kind of occupies this middle space where it's kind of like almost towards the Quest 3, but not quite. But then even just the Quest 2 by itself is still pretty darn impressive feeling, I would say. Great. But both the Pico 4 and the Quest 3 use pancake lenses now, which I'd heard a lot of hype behind, and it does help somewhat, but I won't say it makes as big of a difference as I was expecting. You know, I still think
the Pico 4 is just so darn comfortable, though, isn't it?
That's the main thing. It's a very comfortable device, and I think it's this type of fabric they use here on the edge, and the way it sits on your face, even with glasses. It's like the other ones. I like for the Quest, I have to get lens inserts, and I did for the PSVR 2 as well. Instead of wearing glasses, but this, like, it's not really necessary, and that kind of surprised me.
Because it's small. I don't know how they did it.
It's wild.
It's not a big thing, and it's kind of light as well. I love the thing. I'm really
the
quite
Quest 3 is also relatively small. There, whoops, I disconnected that strap. The Quest 3 is also pretty small, I would say, and I think that comes down to the use of the pancake lenses, so it allows them to kind of reduce the thickness necessary, which helps. Man, it's interesting as well that all these standalone headsets are driven by Android, which I've always wondered if like the research and development that went into making VR viable using Android as an OS actually has like a knock-on effect of helping Android in general, just with like performance related things, right?
If you look at Vulkan extension support, a lot of it's VR driven, actually.
So like, right? Like, VR is also good just for the Android ecosystem in general in terms of improving their performance numbers with 3D applications. So there's a positive thing there. But yeah, VR, it's in a weird spot, and I don't think it's ever going to become truly mainstream, at least not while headsets are the way they are. But like, it does seem to be, at least. I mean, what do you think? Do you think there's enough of an audience there that you guys can still continue to make these types of games? And maybe it's the one space where AAA can't really invade, so to speak, as well.
Well, that's what part of the reason why I love it is because we don't know what works in it yet. Not really. I mean, Beat Saber is obviously an outlier, and it's a huge hit. There's a few other titles. I mean, Among Us in VR is huge, and I guess that's the case everywhere. Pistol Whip, but it's, in a way, we haven't had the VR hit yet, the thing that, you know, or perhaps the sort of maybe more narrative driven VR game that everyone has to play.
Half-Life Alyx is that, but it's still not coming to anything else, which is, you know, crazy. I mean, the fact that it's sad that it's not been on PSVR 2. I was really hoping it would be some surprise announcement this summer, but it wasn't. I'm so surprised by that too, because the game itself is so good, and like, yet so few people could really easily play it, I guess. Yeah. And it's just like, man, but that's Valve. Valve just kind of does their own thing, right? And I don't think that Sony could wheel, even if they rolled a dump truck full of money up to their door, if they don't want to do it, they'll just be like, whatever. Like, we're not interested.
You know, Gaben would be like, well, can we put Steam on your PlayStation 5?
Like they did with PS3, the PS
Like with
Triple.
Portal? Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what's going on. But yeah, it's a great game, and it's a shame that that's not on PSVR 2. The other thing is, like, I mean, the one thing I can't believe Astrobot Rescue Mission. Speaking of HD remakes, that's one I would have liked to see on PSVR 2, because it is genuinely the best 3D platformer I've ever played.
So good.
It's incredible.
So good.
And it's a classic. It's disappeared now.
Sure.
The only way, it's gated in the PSVR 1 headset. It's
right.
a tragedy.
I would assume those guys are working on like a follow-up to that for PSVR 2. Like that has to be what else have they been doing since they launched the
I hope so.
The Astrobot thing along with PS5, but they've been silent since, and almost
but who knows if they're making a VR game now, or if they're just making another flat game?
Because I bet it's VR. I would bet it's VR
or both.
Maybe
probably.
both.
Or
actually, both would be great because I don't know how you. I guess with the way Astrobot works, it just uses the DualShock 4, right? So they could do the same here, and it used it in very clever ways that could work in a flat experience. So maybe they find a way to do that. I don't know, but
or maybe they some asymmetrical sort of co-op on that would be amazing as well. But who knows? Who knows what they do with it? But I hope so, because it's an absolutely incredible game, and it's one that hasn't been played by enough people. I genuinely think it's the best 3D platformer ever made.
It's up there for me. It's definitely one of the best I've ever played. It's extremely good.
After King Kong, or
it's not quite King Kong level, but it's close. It's close. I do actually have one little question, and maybe we can expand on this, from Simplex, who asks, any thoughts on the new VR hotness MetaQuest 3, especially the mixed reality that allows for a huge virtual screen displayed on an empty wall? I was one of the first, so I sincerely hope my question will be featured, and there you go, it is. Have you had a
well, it's a great piece of hardware. For the downsides to it, I'll get them out of the way. Is I wish it had eye tracking. It doesn't.
Right.
Right. That's something and the microphone isn't great on it. For some reason, I don't know why that is, but some sort of maybe they can fix that with some sort of software update. But other than that, it's an incredible headset. It's lighter, it's better, it's faster than the previous generation, and the mixed reality stuff and the pass-through stuff works really, really well. There's still a little bit of sort of like a floaty thing when you put your hands in front of it. You still feel like you're a little bit underwater.
Oh yeah,
with the pass-through. It's just
when you get, especially
makes me feel,
if you get close to something, right? If you like put it on, you walk close to like a shelf and you try to read the labels on something. Like once you get the cameras too close to it, it all just goes nuts, and you're just like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a bit, but it's compared to the previous generation, it's awesome.
It feels amazing, and it kind of hints at what Apple, I think, wants to do with their Vision Pro, right? Like, but obviously much cheaper.
I mean, the idea of them of you actually starting up a game and then being, just teleported into a different world, minus the loading screen. The sensation that we were discussing at length earlier in Spider-Man, for instance, too. The idea of portals is exciting. The fact that you can walk through your living room into a virtual world and back out of it, etc., and then have that sort of like seamless flow with no load times between reality and fiction, etc., is beautiful, and it's starting to do that, and so I think it's great what they've done. It is more expensive than the previous generation, so again, like, it's the timing with the world currently being in the state that it is not great, But I can't imagine that they're probably losing money on that hardware anyways to begin with. So who knows?
That's right. That's right.
But I think it's great. I think it's an amazing piece of hardware. But at the same time, we don't have to go pay for all of that if you don't want to play mixed reality. You want to play the sort of the really great high-end VR games. Then you can also get a Pico 4 easily, or even a Quest 2. Because I think because there's tons of games still coming out for those systems and will be, and also since there are about 20, 30, I don't know how many million Quest 2s out there, no one is going to stop supporting them anytime soon. So I think, you know, for those whoever are on a tighter budget, you know, I think it's okay to go for the previous generation Quest or indeed a Pico 4, and still enjoy the majority of amazing games now and coming up.
And hey, you can still use stuff like Virtual Desktop with them and do PC VR wirelessly, which always feels amazing. You know,
Yes.
you lose a little bit of image quality, obviously, and you need a pretty fast router to pull it off. But there is a nice sense of freedom being untethered from your PC. So cool stuff. But
Now, VR is beautiful, and it may never be mainstream, or maybe one day it will be. But at the same time, we are all already living inside of virtual reality. Like, you know, and that's the thing that people don't. Yeah, I mean, every single time you cross the road with Google Maps, you are actually walking not inside the real world. You're walking inside a 3D projected map by Google. You know,
right.
so and so we're all constantly inhabiting virtual worlds without realizing it. So that distinction is gradually being removed more and more. And of course, like, it's the headset right now that's causing this friction where people go like, oh shit, the commitment of putting this thing on, like shutting myself off from the rest of the world. Well, technically you're already shutting yourself off from the rest of the world by staring at your phone while your kid is trying to get your attention. So, but how do we now sort of bring these realities and fiction together in a seamless way, in a humane way? And I think, interestingly, diving fully into an immersive world like VR is a portal back into the real world, a much better one than the sort of invisible thieves of our reality that we have surrounded ourselves with.
oh yeah. Anyway. But yes, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because with the Google Maps stuff, because I was thinking about how when I lived in Tokyo back in 2005 versus visiting this year, smartphones didn't really exist in this sense, right? So I had to navigate back then just by like signs and, you know, landmarks and things like that, and you couldn't really rely on a phone to get around. But once you have a phone, it just feels like it changes the experience. It's less adventurous, and almost like a cheat code somehow. You know what I mean?
It takes your thoughts away, and your awareness of the world around you. It's weird. I was visiting a friend of mine in hospital in Berlin 10 days ago, and I get out of the main train station, and I immediately go like, oh, where's that hospital? So I go on the Google map, and it makes me cross a little bridge, and it gets close to where the chancellor is in those buildings, and then it was like a foggy day and stuff, so the whole thing was confused and. And then I look, hang on, it's somewhere over there. And I see this ginormous building, which literally just has a freaking hospital on it. And I'm such an idiot. You know, I should have just fucking opened my eyes and then follow the big ass building. You know, so it's weird how we're sort of we've automated ourselves out of thinking or being even aware of the world around us. And the thing about VR, what's so exciting to me, is that you're conscious, like you going to Tokyo or whatever, we're consciously traveling somewhere.
Right.
We're consciously taking ourselves VR. Out of now into that. I'm going
There's
there.
a barrier.
And once you take it off and you go like, I'm back.
Right.
And whereas the other thing is like, I've got this on, Game Pass, whatever, like $300 million game, I don't care, because my phone just rang and the cat wants attention and whatever. So it's like everything becomes nothing. And so I hope that the one thing that I love about VR, and I want to encourage people to experience, is that you get to really cherish someone else's creation and travel to a place and really take yourself away from the world around you and really be immersed. It is something else.
I agree. That is something for sure. But, you know, like all good things, our VR chat has to come to an end, because we still have some Q&A here, some additional questions from our patrons. So let's get to it. Yes, it's that time of the show every week where we take questions from our wonderful patrons. They have submitted many this week as usual, and many of them are great. Actually, all of them are great, but we don't have time to go through every single question. Sorry, Alan. You know, but I have one here from Green Swede, who says, greetings. I believe Rich, who could not be with us here today, mentioned briefly in the FSR3 hands-on video that VSync should be enabled if you're using DLSS frame gen combined with VRR to avoid screen tearing. And this got me curious about which control panel options I should actually use for any given scenario, as it can vary greatly. This is a bit overwhelming for me, as many reports online often state different things in regards to VSync on or off, frame cap below screen refresh rate, frame pacing judder, etc. So the question is, can you guys make a short video talking about the most sensible or optimized GPU control panel settings to use for any given PC gaming scenario? Alex.
Yes. I want to, if I were to do a video like this, which I think is very realistic, when I presume there's going to be a lull, either mid-November, well, probably not mid-November, but as the new year starts, usually there's like a, Oliver, this is your episode with the bleeps. It's a fuck you, it's January kind of thing where there's going to be nothing to be releasing. And there I can put out videos that are like a little bit more freeform. And I think this could go into a video that I've been having in my brain for a while now that's called like VRR is not our savior. That's just like the short title. It's where like it's going about like, yes, it's going to explain what the technology is. I already have a video on VSync, but it's going to explain what the technology is, what its limits are, why it only can do so many things, like etc. And as part of this, we'll be talking about setting it up on both AMD and Intel and NVIDIA, I hope. I'd like this idea a lot, but the basic idea is that pretty much if you're going to be using G-Sync, you should probably turn on VSync. There's no reason not to. And then if you follow the guides out there, a lot of them will say to also limit the refresh rate below VSync. So it's like if you have a 120 Hz panel, limit to like 116 on a per game basis or 117 on a per game basis. Do it like using RTSS, I would imagine is the best way to do it, or any other frame capper below. You're not going to, VRR doesn't run into frame pacing issues. That's the one thing you have to think about. It. Frame pacing is a different thing entirely. It's something that happens as a result of VSync, right? So when people use the word frame pacing, I don't think they're using it correctly. VRR is actually a solver of frame pacing issues. So that's another thing. Judder, you shouldn't get judder at all if you're running VRR anyway. So, but I'll try and make a video like that. I think as the new year starting later, when there's time.
All right, that's a good answer, Alex. But let's move on to the next question. This one comes from Lux, and they say, "Hello, guys. The last rumors on the Nintendo Switch 2 Electric Boogaloo situation suggest that there would be two models, one with retro-compatible capabilities and digital games only, and the other one with without backwards compatibility and digital games only, and the other with physical game compatibility and backwards compatibility with Nintendo Switch 1. The latter, he wrote later, but the latter one being more expensive. What is your opinion on this particular matter? I would see this a little out of line with how Nintendo has operated in the past, as gatekeeping such an important feature under a higher price model would be a first for them. Thanks for your work and have a nice day."
Would it, though?
And my feeling is that I don't think there's going to be two models.
Yeah, that seems nuts.
And if there are, it's not going to be split this way. I mean, I have no information here necessarily. I'm just saying I don't think that those reports, that does not seem like something that's going to happen to me.
The only analog I can think about is the 2DS. Kind of,
but
not
that came
really at all.
That came way later.
It's
right?
way late, and that was like a cost budget thing, and it had its use, I think, for people who wanted to play DS games.
Also for kids.
Even the Virtual Boy was standalone, so yeah.
Right. So yeah.
I don't
know about this.
The idea of splitting their market base like that, the closest analog I can think of is like the N64 expansion pack, but I'm not really sure that is comparable at all, really.
Yeah.
So I just don't think Nintendo would actually do something like this. It really feels, not only would it be bad for the market, but it's also just confusing. Like the idea, especially with the audience that they're targeting with the Switch, the idea of like, somebody has a Switch 2 and grandma or somebody's going to buy them a gift, but what if they have the wrong type of Switch and they can't use that game? Or it just creates a lot of situations, I think, where they'll be confused as to what works on which model, why, all this stuff. And that's not something I think that they would want to answer in the marketing materials. It would just be...
Yes. Although one thing that is exciting now, and I'm really quite impressed that PlayStation did that with the new digital versus the new physical PlayStation 5, is that if you buy the new slim one or whatever it's going to be called, when you buy the digital one, you can
upgrade,
take that little bit off and upgrade it to a disc PS5. I love that. Like that makes me feel good as someone who, I mean, I love physical games personally, and I don't want that to disappear, and I hate everything just being logged in someone else's cloud, and I feel like it makes one feel very vulnerable about the games that one sort of owns in one's library, etc. And the fact that they give that option is great. So I mean, perhaps a sort of slightly modular switch could be cool, since already they've introduced the idea of like clicking different things into it and stuff like that from the side. Maybe you could click a sort of click a physical drive into it if you want to have a digital version, but even that seems unlikely given Nintendo's
I don't think they'd go for that. That doesn't seem like a very Nintendo thing at all. So let's hope that's not a Nintendo thing, because that would be not good.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on.
Yeah, and essentially, and also the drive is essentially just an SD card. I mean, it's like,
is it that expensive?
Like, yeah,
really?
Exactly.
It's very different from an optical disc drive, which is a larger, more expensive piece. I would say
the space for its moving parts. You know what I mean?
But the rumors are also saying that this one without the slot would also not support games in backwards compatible mode, and I just don't see why they would ever want to do that. Because if you're buying their hardware, I would assume that if they have backwards compatibility, they would want people with this new Switch to still be able to purchase any games they want that were also on Switch, right? Why would they stop them from doing that if the feature is supported in the first place? Does not make sense. I don't think they're going to do it.
No.
So, all right. Next question from Mr. Cotters. My question is a bit off topic, which we've already done plenty of times in this episode, which is great. But why do graphics drivers need to be made to optimize games? Why is it not that the games optimize themselves for the drivers? You would think the games being made would have to comply with the drivers rather than the drivers complying with the game. Obey. Keep up the good work. Alex, what do you think?
There's a lot of, this is a funny question.
Yeah.
I like it because if you read about it, games can do things that are like API illegal. They can do things that certain drivers don't support. Drivers can say they support things, but maybe actually don't completely in the way that the person expects them who's writing the game. So there's a lot of, it's like any interface. There's like things that work and don't. There's two things coming at each other and they're interfacing, and it's like, okay, so we got to get them to work. That's why you have standard APIs, etc. The thing is, it depends on which APIs we're talking about, though. Like with the old style, OpenGL, DirectX 11, a lot of it was coming from NVIDIA, AMD, Intel there, doing all the quote unquote, a lot of optimization behind the scenes to make it run well. With DirectX 12 and Vulkan, a lot of that responsibility goes down actually to the developer. Not all of it, definitely not all of it. There's still some layer there controlled by NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel, but it is a lot of the developers' responsibility at that point in time, and that's why it is so hard, and that's why we've seen it done so unsuccessfully, I would say, in the last, how long has DX12 existed? Almost like 10 years, feels like now.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Has it been 10 years? Jeez.
Might have been.
Mantle came out in like 2013, 2014? I don't remember. But it's been, explicit APIs on PC have been a thing for a while, and it's so rare to see a game use them really, really well, because you're essentially having to take over a lot of responsibilities that a $1 billion company would usually have, where they have all this money and everything to pump into it. So I'm a little bit wishy-washy on explicit APIs these days. But yeah, that's the way it is. It's depending upon the API, but it definitely still requires both to do something. Still.
Well, I mean, it's not like, us developers have a sort of constant contact with, AMD or whatever, and they're like, oh, you will comply to this new update that we're going to arbitrarily release 3 months from now, or else, it would be impossible to do that, and also for them to communicate that to every developer in the world. So yes, there's a give and take, and there's a constant communication and technology moves like especially on the graphics card side is there's new iterations coming out every few months, whereas in the console space there's one console that comes out every few years. So
it's closed platform
us developers, we can't keep up with that pace, nor can they keep up with our pace of making games. So there will always be a strange
it almost would assume then that the drivers that the game is being made with are basically perfect. They would have to be, functionally perfect at that point, or not necessarily perfect, but close to it. And they're not, especially when they're always changing the hardware. There's a lot of stuff that's happening on the driver's side. And because computers are open platforms, there's just so many factors that have to be accounted for. So I think it's just companies having to work together to find the best solution for what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and we sometimes, as developers, discover things in hardware that the hardware manufacturers didn't even know that hardware could do. So
right.
I mean, and I'm giving a simple example of very very simple example in this case because it's the game for the Playdate that we released with Frédéric Renal earlier this year. He he's now in his 50s, right? And so he's built his career on actually writing straight to the chip. He didn't use Unity or Unreal to make graphics. He always wrote bespoke engines from scratch, such as the first real-time 3D character in a game, human character, which was in Alone in the Dark, for instance. And so when he gets access to a piece of hardware, he goes straight in there, And so he was pushing that little silly playdate with a crank, to its limits from day one, and they go like, oh my God, we didn't even know it could do this, So, and that's technically what's happening on smaller levels all the time with PC developers especially. It's like they just unlock things that AMD wasn't aware of, and they go, oh shit, now we have to support this, but if we but there's going to have a knock-on effect on the other games that don't. And so that's what's happening.
Playdate's really interesting in that sense because it almost feels like an old school console compared to where we are now, right? Because it's very limited in terms of overall capabilities, but it sort of rewards creative programming from what I've seen, which is neat. I'm happy that it exists. It's a cool little device.
Yeah, have you done an episode about it?
No, and it's a tough one because filming that thing is difficult because it's not backlit.
No, it has an amazing capture thing built in. It has a little app. It's called Mirror. And you just get it from the Playdate's website.
I'll have to grab that and try it and see what I can do. 'Cause it's a cool little device.
Yeah, with Mirror, you can capture gameplay footage perfectly. And it can even capture it at 2x, so like twice the size.
Nice.
So it's more video friendly.
Right.
So it's super awesome.
I'll have to look into that. But speaking of game releases, there's this question here from Spudnik, which I think is interesting. It says, hi DF, what do you think about the developer of Cities Skylines 2 coming out and admitting that they have, quote unquote, not achieved the benchmark we targeted for their game, but are not changing the release date at all? And that is fascinating because this game is coming out and it has some pretty serious issues from what I've seen. And yet they're still going to go ahead and release it anyway, despite saying beforehand that they know that there's a problem here. Not that I would imagine any game that has a problem, I'm sure they're well aware of those problems. But what do you think about this situation? Do you think they could afford to delay it, especially as a PC digital only kind of? I mean, it is just PC first, right?
Yeah, this is.
So I feel like. What do you think?
I mean, I'm grateful for honesty always in life.
That's true.
In this case, though, the developer puts out good games.
Yes.
Generally.
They do.
But it would be really nice if the issues were tackled pre-release so that there isn't like the issue that we've had the last 3 years now is that games are just not released
way too
hot. Like way too hot. I would say like totally MVP kind of style where it's like, yeah, we know we're going to get the first batch of sales from people who just buy things based upon hype and etc. But this is not that market. City Skyline 2 is definitely not that market. It's not your Cyberpunk. It's not your
Jedi Fallen Order.
Jedi Fallen Order where people just buy it because that's the word Star Wars
Jedi
in the
Survivor,
title or something like that.
I guess.
Or Jedi Survivor, etc. Like this is like a very niche thing. So releasing it really hot, and not in an EA capacity because they've already had a beta testing thing. It's a very, I don't think it's a good idea for the game for its longevity because the original game has like a ton of really long historical like DLC program and a lot of features unlocked over time. I think it's like, I think if you want to get a game to people to talk about it in a great way and don't have to rely on like a No Man's Sky style of comeback, which took a lot of time and effort, by the way, and money, like release it in a much better state first instead of admitting that it's in like a great, not a good state, and then releasing it.
I'm sure they're trying, but we have no idea. We have no idea what the finances of any of these companies are. They need to release it in a certain quarter in order to actually make money back. And at the same time, if they've already have a track record of making a game with DLC and constant updates, then clearly their fan base will know that they'll be updating the game anyway. So, I mean, we've all been sort of like in that, especially in the PC field, in this sort of constant sort of green light kind of thing has become kind of normal now to have like day one patches and everything else.
Yeah.
It's tough one. I mean, I like for instance with C-Smash, we because we were a team of 7, 8 making the game. Having just also released The Last Worker 3 months prior to releasing C-Smash. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. And we made a conscious decision, like we want to make a game that has no bugs, that is stable, that is beautiful, etc., etc. So let's shift a couple of the features that we talked about in previews and stuff by a couple of months, just so the initial release can be perfect and slick and gorgeous. And it was, of course we did that sort of frame rate update a week later, but after release, but and some reviewers that reviewed the games like, oh, they promised more and it's not in there. And then, and now it's in there. The September update was massive. The game has doubled in size, etc. So I empathize with people that, go like, we have to release now because we've announced the date, the PR has been out there, the ads have been printed, whatever. It's like sometimes you just have to go, but I don't know how big their issues are. That's if it's true. A big buggy mess, then maybe.
I think it's more about performance. They like, that was the big, they didn't hit their performance targets pre-release, and they were saying it's like not an optimized experience at launch, which, obviously, being a PC game, the technical aspects of it are, I want to say like almost more important than a console game. Not in like saying consoles don't have good performance, but you get like really skewered on Steam if you have a product that has technical issues at launch on PC. Yeah, in a way that you don't see on console usually.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
it's hard.
It does.
Wish them the best, nonetheless.
Yeah, seriously. I hope they can turn this around because, their games are usually well loved. And the reviews for this weren't that great, I think, as a result. 'Cause it seems like a lot of reviewers had problems with it. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure they'll turn it around, but it's a shame that this is what keeps happening these days. And I guess, games becoming as complex as they are is partially to blame for this and just all the other issues. But man... it sucks when it happens. So
it's tough out there, but it is also very important for the community to learn that no one is ever setting out to ship a bad game or a buggy product, and to show a little bit, and no one owes you anything. I mean, sure, it's hard to think that someone owes you something when you've paid money, of course, for something, obviously. But the thing is, like, people try hard, and it's been a very, very tough period. And as we can see, there's been so many layoffs and so many threats to all these companies over the last few months in this industry that people who are shipping things now, are heroes. They really are. Making a game is extremely difficult. And I wish people were, just a little bit more patient sometimes with some developers. We've been very, very lucky with C-Smash because we have the most positive community, and people adore it, and it just keeps going from strength to strength. But not everyone is that lucky, and I think we need to show respect to these developers.
That's a benefit, I guess, of targeting VR, because the VR community itself is a bit smaller, and the people that are into VR are really into VR. And I've just noticed that VR discussions have been more positive in general as a result.
They can be, but there's a lot of negativity from non-VR people towards VR titles.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And then there's also, but also there's some weird stuff. I mean, there's a tennis game that came out on PlayStation VR 2 this week. Encore Tennis, something I forgot what it's called. Sorry,
Virtual Tennis.
And something tennis, and it was like had horrible bugs at release. I mean, really quite bad, and to a point where like suddenly like the whole stadium goes quiet and everything just like nothing works, and I mean just big so that stuff happens, and there's quite a lot of negative backlash on there, and also the community was really quite negative about the I forgot the name of that now as well. The first person shooter that PlayStation published on PSVR 2 that came out about a month ago. So there can be quite a lot of negativity around some titles in VR as well. So thankfully that is not the case for us. But it's a tough old world out there, guys.
Indeed. But I think we coming up to the end of the show here. We've been going for quite a while, so let's wrap it up. Thanks as always to you, Alex, for being my wingman here.
I love being wingman. It's cool.
And thanks for joining us on this episode, Jörg. It was nice to have you. Get a different voice in the mix. And I'll be curious to see what people think. But if you enjoyed this, as always, you know where to find us. Come check us out over on Patreon as well. We've got a great community over there, especially on the Discord. Lots of good fun happening. Lots of great discussions. And hopefully this episode turned out okay enough without the guiding hand of Richard. We'll see how it goes. I can't wait for him to see it, and he'll be like, Richard, what did you guys do while I was away?
What did you do to my show?
He'll be back next week, though. Don't worry. And we'll be sure to see you then as well.